He woke with a jolt. It felt as if his chest had caved in. His lungs desperately sucked and expelled air, pumping to the same furious rhythm as his heart. His fingers crushed into the soil as his mind raced to settle on what was happening. Everything was dark, and he felt that he was being consumed by the throbbing in his head. All of his insides were burning, and his ears were hot with blood. He tried to lean forward, but found himself held down by an enormous weight. It felt like he'd been hit by a freight train made of adrenaline. He leaned his head forward and squinted through the darkness. His chest was pinned to the earth beneath a black nylon vest, crimped with 50 pockets lining it. The bars, he thought to himself. That's where I am. That's what's happening. Each pocket was stitched shut, with a 1 kilogram gold ingot inside. Some of the stitches had rips at the seams, but he could still make out the tortoise insignias stamped along the bars. Op funds. Enough for twice the duration. Perfect, he muttered with a sarcastic grunt. So much for this being painless. He forced himself forward, cringing at the sharp pain in his chest, but pulling himself up onto his knees. At least 3 ribs fractured, and probably some serious internal burns. Love that the doctors never mention a word of this shit. 6 feet tall means a 6-foot drop. His head was spinning, and his eyes felt acidic. At least this drop has half-decent medical services, he thought with a grimace. He looked at the tattooed markings on his wrist. USAZ 2032. First step needs to be confirming the drop point. Everyone's heard the stories about guys who get dropped too soon and have to wait a decade to even start their op. He stared at the tattoo date again. Could be worse. Could get dropped after. He couldn't imagine living that long knowing his purpose was placed just out of reach due to technical errors. Not a lot of room for mistakes in this business. He looked around in the darkness, trying to spot any significant source of light to use as a heading. All he could hear around him was the din of insects and the rustling of tall grass. He felt his heart start to race again in sudden panic. There aren't any lights. Oh gods, there aren't any lights. He winced and pushed himself abruptly to his feet. In all directions, expanding far beneath the trillions of glowing stars in the flawless night sky, the primeval fields whispered quietly in the passing wind.